You are listening to the Why Smart Women podcast, the podcast that helps smart women work out why we repeatedly make the wrong decisions and how to make better ones. From relationships, career choices, finances, to faux fur jackets and kale smoothies. Every moment of every day, we're making decisions. Let's make them good ones. I'm your host, Annie McCubbin, and as a woman of a certain age, I've made my own share of really bad decisions. Not my husband. I don't mean him, though. I did go through some shockers to find him. And I wish this podcast had been around to save me from myself. This podcast will give you insights into the working of your own brain, which will blow your mind. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording, and you are listening on this day. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Hello, smart women. It's super lovely to have you with me this afternoon. I am thrilled because I have an absolutely delightful guest who has very kindly hopped on a plane and come all the way up from Melbourne to join me in my glamorous studio on the northern beaches in Sydney. Hello, Anne Burns.
Hello.
Hello. So after 25 years at Accenture, you don't look old enough.
Oh, thank you.
And we have commented quite a bit prior to rolling that she has not a line on her face.
It's not. I haven't had any work yet. I'm open to it, but so far so good.
It's the English skin, right?
Well, it's mainly from where I'm from in England, where there's no light, no sunshine whatsoever in Birmingham. So we all have this skin and we all look like this because we've never seen the sun.
You've never actually seen it. It must have been a shock when you came to Australia.
Well, my dad did say to me, "Why are you moving to Australia? You don't like the sun, you don't like sand, and you don't like the sea."
Yeah.
To which I said, well, I'll go down there and if I don't like it, I'll come back.
And how long ago was that?
That was 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so there we go. That's why she has divine skin and why all us Australians are all having to have endless work to try and sort out the wrinkles anyway.
Stop
right. So Anne is the wine in the way? It's all right. We'll just move it. It's all good. Right. Okay.
Don't move it too far away.
Yes. So after 25 years at Accenture, she has founded her own coaching business, Triumph in Adversity, where she provides frank and fearless advice to women that actually makes a difference. And I say that because a lot of things that are said to women are absolute rubbish. You do keynote speaking, don't you?
I do, and I do leadership development.
Yeah.
I chose the name of my company, Triumph and Adversity. You have to say it like that with some Shakespearean emphasis.
Do it.
Because I do think women are given really bad advice, and quite often it's nonsense.
Shocking.
So for me, I am an anti-perfectionist, and I believe that you learn more from your adversities than you do from triumph.
Yes.
And in fact, it's the adversities along the way in your career that light the pathway to something that's quite incredible. What makes you interesting to other people is the scars that you have and the interesting tales that you can tell. Not this glittering, glorious, Instagrammable career. Yep. Life isn't like that. Yep. Hence the name Triumph and Adversity. Yep. And I'm also quite straightforward. As I said, I'm a Brummie.
Yes,
so
I know this to be true.
So it's about giving people frank and fearless advice when it counts and where it really matters. You know, there are points in your career where you just want someone to tell you the truth or to give you some bold, blunt advice.
Yes, you do.
So you can take a different path.
As opposed to telling, sort of feeding women woo-woo and you can manifest whatever you want just by...
Woo-woo isn't helpful.
It's not helpful.
Yeah.
It's funny because David and I were watching, you probably don't like it, and I'm surprised that I like it, but what's the name of the actor, David? Jeremy Clarkson. He's on the car
I know
thing.
exactly who he is. I'm Team Caleb. I'll just have to declare that.
Okay.
I'm Team Caleb, not Team Jeremy.
Okay, but the show is all around... Failure is so interesting. Yeah. Failure and trying and doing workarounds and nobody wants a glittering, curated life. We like to look at something.
I have to tell you, though, if they had a woman running Diddley Squat Farm, it would be way better and the programme would be way more efficient and entertaining, but maybe that's just me.
But what about his girlfriend?
I wouldn't comment on his girlfriend, but I think if Jeremy would like to invite me over to run Diddley Squat Farm, I think I'd do a pretty good job.
I think you would too. You'd have everything under control in a week, right? So that's what we were saying last night. We were saying sort of failure and overcoming things is what's interesting. So Anne has also facilitated workshops for chief executive women where she had the extreme good fortune
of meeting me. It pretty much changed your life, didn't it?
It did in many unexpected ways, actually. I mean, those were fun days. I mean, what a privilege. Thousands and thousands of women through that really program. What an honour and a privilege to do that. And
100%.
The best bit is you see the positive impact, and you see it there and then in the room. It is changing people's lives. It's changing people's perceptions of themselves, and it's giving them the advice they need to thrive.
So how do you think it changes women's perception of themselves?
I think straight away, lots of women have this negative narrative about themselves, this set of assumptions that runs and runs and runs. I can't public speak. I can't. Actually, you can. And as you know, we give them the skills and the knowledge to be able to do that, but we also shift their mindset from deficit into growth.
And how do we do that? It's true, we do.
So there is a process for that. Firstly, I think it's just being a lot more self-aware about what you're actually good at. The feedback we're given all the time as women is, you have areas for improvement.
Yep.
Or you have the dreaded W word, weaknesses. By the way, I have none of those. I have none. I just give no oxygen to that stuff. You can waste a decade, 2 decades of your life trying to fix stuff that you are never going to be good at.
So true.
And so the evidence base that we use on those programs is strengths and understanding what your strengths are. And it's backed by 36 million data sets, not kidding about that. And so we know that works. And actually seeing those women read those assessments that they do and understand and then use the language that is given to them about themselves. Never again is there a negative narrative about themselves to themselves, let alone a negative narrative about themselves to other people.
Yep.
It kind of cuts that behaviour. It interrupts that serious negative loop straight away.
And I think we'd have to say that considering the just disgusting, devastating amount of domestic violence there is around at the moment, that the idea that men are sort of feeding into this negative idea that women have about themselves and then undermining them is you almost wish everybody would have access to a program that goes, yeah, you can't do that. That's okay. Not everybody can do everything, but you're really good at this.
Yeah. I mean, I think men and women should know what they're really good at. And I think from the age of 25 onwards, your neural pathways in your brain begin to be set. So before 25, go for your life, explore everything, take as much opportunity as you can. After 25, and it's different for men and women.
It is.
But after 25, those neural pathways start to get set. And so if you have a positive experience where your strengths are amplified, then guess what? You're on this incredible trajectory in your career because you're doing what you're naturally good at. You're playing to your strengths. If not, and it's hello.
Yes, Yo-Yo. Just to report, Yo-Yo is up on Anne's lap.
Hello, Yo-Yo.
Yo-Yo.
What are your strengths, Yo-Yo?
Yeah. Yo-Yo's really good
empathy.
She's really good at killing the guinea pigs next door.
Yeah. So hunting, you're good at hunting.
She's really good at hunting,
licking, and empathy. Yes. Excellent.
That's right.
So I think if you know categorically what you are good at, it gives you a better guide than focusing on the gaps that you have or perceived areas of improvement. And my experience with all the women that we coach, and certainly my experience in my career, is lots of people were willing and happy to give me feedback to be more like them.
Yes, that's so right.
But in actual fact, I just needed to be more like me.
Yeah, that's actually so right.
And I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But that took me a good couple of decades to figure out, actually, the feedback you get is to be more like the person giving you feedback, certainly in the environment that I grew up in.
And that's certainly an issue with hiring, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
People hire people that are like them.
Yeah, the confirmation bias kicks in.
Confirmation bias, and then they end up with this extraordinary homogeneity in their team, and they're like, what's going on?
Yeah. So my mum would say, oh, darling, we have to have people around us that appeal you. We have to have people who appeal you. Well, PLU stands for people like us. And
really?
My mom is not really in a position to be that snobbish, to be honest. She grew up in a fairly modest background, but she's developed in her middle age and certainly in her old age this idea of, I only want people around me like PLU. I'm like, actually, Mom, that's quite boring if everybody's all the same. And as we know, the evidence tells us that diversity of thought means we make better decisions.
Way, way, way better. I think there's a strong indicator that we become more conservative as we get older.
Yeah.
And that conservatism I think, expresses itself by wanting to stay safe and in your lane.
Yeah, and with people who look and
sound like you. And we have to be so careful about that.
Yeah.
So Anne and I were thinking if ever we start a combined coaching company, we're going to call it Don't Be a Muppet. Because I think that just about encapsulates our entire philosophy, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Just don't be a Muppet.
Just don't be a Muppet.
Don't let anybody else tell you you're a Muppet. You're not a Muppet. Don't be a Muppet, and just get on with it.
So the real question is, which Muppet would you be?
Yeah.
See, I wouldn't mind being Miss Piggy. I would be okay as Miss Piggy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who I'd be.
You'd be Animal.
Would I? She's saying that because of my hair. I would be Animal, wouldn't I? Does Animal live in a dustbin?
No. Animal's the one that has a crazy good time all the time.
Oh, that's me.
That's you.
That's me, having a crazy good time. So thinking about your biog, why do you think that you've gone in the particular direction that you've gone in? It's a big question, sorry.
So I think initially because somebody took a chance on me. You know, I got my gig in joining Accenture in Australia when I was in the UK. Right. I was 26. I'd never been to Australia. I didn't even know where it was on the map. I kind of did, but not really.
Did you think it was Austria, New Germany?
No.
Okay.
No. I knew it was warm.
Okay.
I had actually done my research. I'm teasing. But there's somebody saw something in me. And it was a very strict process of interviews, but I chanced my way into that discussion.
How did you do that?
Well, I wasn't really on the list. Not my finest hour, Annie, but I will share it with you.
Please do.
So I was at MBA school, and the night we'd finished our exams, we were in a nightclub, obviously, 3 a.m. in the morning.
Of course, as you do.
Dancing, obviously. And I noticed the boys in the corner were having this very deep and meaningful conversation. So, of course, I got my pointy elbows out and went over there and said, "Oh, what are you talking about, lads?" And they said, "Well, we're getting ready for the interview tomorrow." And I'm like, "What interview?" And they said, "Well, this company's coming over from Australia to do these interviews for strategy consultants." To which I said, "That sounds like a good idea." They said, "No, you had to put in your CV 3 weeks ago and you haven't, so you can't be interviewed." So I immediately went home, typed up my CV,
like this.
You know, one finger slightly inebriated CV, and got dressed, 6 o'clock in the morning, went and sat in the reception, waiting for whoever was going to come to do the interviews. And eventually his name was Chris, and he turned up, and I said to him, "Oh, good morning. Welcome to the business school. Would you like to come for coffee?" And he said, "Yes, that'd be fine." Off we went for coffee. And then he said to me, "How long have you worked at the business school?" And I said, "Oh, I don't work at the business school." You could see the nutter alert just go across his face instantly. And he said, "Well, who are you?" Slightly nervous little voice. And I said, "Well, I'd really like to be interviewed, and I've got my CV here, and please would you interview me?" And he said, "Yes, okay, I'll interview you." So he then proceeded to ask me all these incredibly difficult questions. I thought I'd blown it. And he said, "Well, to be fair to everyone else, if you wait upstairs until everybody else has been interviewed, I'll see you at the end of the day, but you must wait upstairs for the full day in case there's a slot for me to call you in." So I sat there all day, and each person that went into the interview saw me sitting there and would say, "Well, you weren't on the list. Why you didn't put your CV in? Why are you here?" And each one, he would come out and he would red pen across the name of the individual. Red pen, red pen, red pen. Finally got to the last one, who was a really good mate of mine. And I thought, well, he's going to nail this. He came out and he said, "Well, you better come in." But he hadn't red penned the last one. And I went in and he sat me down and he said, "Well, I'm going to offer you the job. And it starts on Monday. It's in Sydney." And then he said the magic words, which is, "There is a business class ticket waiting for you at Heathrow."
Yep, and you were on it. You were business class is all we ever
want.
And
the rest is history.
But
he took a chance on me, and he saw potential in me. And I think that kind of inspired me to take lots of chances. And I then developed a bit of a appetite for eating risks for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And that led me into all sorts of trouble in my career. But, you know, an amazing adventure, really, a big, amazing adventure.
So can I just ask you about the emotional impediments that because I think that's what's interesting is how do people overcome the emotional impediments to take a risk, right? Because some of us will and some of us won't. And I think all of us experience the fears and the anxieties about doing something that is risky. So I know it's a little while ago, but But do you remember the emotional state that you were in and anything you had to overcome to actually go in there, get dressed and sit in there on that day?
Absolutely. Have you been to Birmingham?
Maybe I was a bit drunk.
Can you imagine Birmingham in the 80s? I mean, when I grew up in the 80s in Birmingham, just outside Birmingham, it was a place of not a lot of hope. Now, fast forward 30 years, it's an incredibly thriving community. But when I grew up, I knew that there wasn't really a future for me there. And so for me, it wasn't actually the emotional release. It was just like, oh my gosh, you can escape.
Right.
And so for me, it was this absolute burning ambition to escape and go on a big adventure.
Right.
And then I think as I got into my career, I get bored quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I always say to myself, why not? What could possibly go wrong? And of course, loads of things go wrong.
And what do you do then? Because I think that's also for anybody who's listening, I think it's really interesting to know how we deal with things when they go wrong, because inevitably they will.
So I say to myself, what could possibly go wrong? And then if something does go wrong,
then what?
I say to myself, okay, well, we are where we are. What are we going to do?
Right.
And so I'm very action oriented. I honestly think I can talk my way out of anything, and I can certainly ideate my way out of any problem. Like, I have ridiculous amounts of ideas. And if I give you an example, for example.
Yes, please do.
Straight after Fukushima happened in Japan, 2011. And I was the lead for Asia Pacific for the utilities industry. Very sexy industry, gas, water, electricity.
So sexy.
So sexy.
I can barely sit in the same room as you.
And Fukushima had happened, and everybody said to me, you can't go to Japan. You can't go to Japan. You can't go to Japan. And I said, well, that's a bit of a shame because I've already booked the ticket. And I knew that everything had already gone wrong. And so going up there actually was a huge risk. A huge risk for these
Risk
men.
of what? What was the risk?
Physical risk to myself,
right,
because of the danger.
Yeah.
Career risk that it will all go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
If I go up there and you know the story of what happened with Fukushima, and if I go up there and make it worse, for example, the impact of that on a million people, reputational impact to the business that I was representing.
Right.
So every risk under the planet, reputation, safety, personal safety, everything under the sun. But I remember meeting these 8 young men at the airport, and they were so happy to get some help.
Yeah.
That I remember being physically shocked by that. They were so grateful that I'd actually turned up, and they were so grateful that I knew what I was talking about, and I was very practical. And so even though everything had already gone wrong in my mind, I was just saying to myself, these people need help. And even if we get it half right, it's going to be better than where they are.
Right.
And I've always adopted that. Even if we get it half right, it's going to be better than where we are.
So it sounds like you use your problem-solving skills to ameliorate the effects of the emotional part of the brain. So the emotional part of the brain, which is, as we know, is very risk averse. It doesn't want you to take a risk. It wants you to keep safe, right? It's what keeps us very much sort of corralled. But it sounds like you have that emotional response, and then you use your problem-solving skills, which is prefrontal cortex, to work around it. Is that right?
I would say that makes me sound very clever, so I'm going to say, yes, Annie, that's exactly right. But in reality, I think certainly my brain likes to be entertained. My brain knows it can problem solve in any situation.
Yeah.
But me, as an individual, I like to be entertained. I get bored very easily, and I like to learn new things. So my brain is fed actually by taking risks in order to learn new things.
Yeah. I think what that means is that process that I just talked about is just very quick in you.
Probably.
It's just very, very rapid fire.
Probably.
Whereas some people will sort of swim around in that limbic system in the fear, understandably, because we don't want to be unsafe.
Yeah.
They will swim around in that and maybe never take that step, right, to actually...
I think that's exactly right. I mean, I always say to myself, is it better to jump off the bridge or be pushed? Of course it's better to jump.
Yeah.
Of course it's better to jump.
Yeah.
And so I tend to look for opportunities, and I tend to take risks that I find interesting, where I'm going to learn something.
Yeah.
And I do that very quickly.
Yeah. So because I know that you do a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
Yes. If you have a coachee, which is very, very common, that is sort of swimming around in their limbic system and because what we know is that we make a decision in the limbic system and it's generally around keeping us safe. And then we post-rationalize it in the prefrontal cortex, so it sort of makes sense to us. So if you do have someone and you know that they should be doing something different, taking a risk, getting out of a situation, going into a new situation, how do you coach them to actually make that leap, knowing that everybody doesn't have your sort of brain?
Great question. Thank you. So there's three things, essentially. The first is, let's work out what you're really good at. So many women have no idea what they're really good at. They think
true.
They are good at what they've been told they are good at. So I think step one is, let's work out with evidence base, what is it that you're really good at? And then let's think through, what are the examples of when you've used that? So when you're having the best day ever, literally the best day ever, it's because you're in flow. It's because you're using your strengths.
Yep.
When you're having the shittest day ever, it's because you're not using any of your strengths. You are forcing yourself to do things that you're naturally not good at. So step number one, let's work out what you're really good at, what your natural talents are, and let's get you focused on that. Let's turn away from the stuff that you're trying to fix about yourself. Women don't need to be fixed. Men don't need to be fixed. Actually, we should just focus on what we're really good at. And that takes an intervention like coaching or an assessment or some kind of a process to focus. So that's number one. Number two then is generally when people are swimming around, finding 2 to 3 pathways. So lots of people fixate on a singular pathway. So I'm swimming around and I'm in chaos. There's only one way out. Actually, there's not one way out. There's multiple ways out. And the ability to be able to say, okay, well, let's talk about the pathways.
Ah, right.
And so they're no longer obsessed with there's only one pathway. You know, when I came up through my career, there was only one pathway. You had to be a partner. You had to be a partner. And now I see in professional services, actually some of these lateral moves are much more powerful because you become more well-rounded in terms of managing a practice, for example. And so that multiplicity of pathways and options relieves the pressure that many people put on themselves for there is only one way.
Considering that the environment has changed and there is a multiplicity of pathways, why do you think we do get fixated on one pathway? What do you think that's about?
I think it's partly organisational culture that kind of says this is the definition of success.
Yeah, right.
And I certainly went through that in my career. You know, if you'd have asked me at 25, what do you want to be? I would have said, absolutely, I want to be a partner at Accenture. No question. And that up until, I made partner at 31, that was my mission. That's what I wanted to do. And I was absolutely took every opportunity to do that and prove myself. That was my definition of success. You get into your late 30s and early 40s, actually your definition of success is the relationships that you have at work or with clients and the opportunities that you have. Then you get into your 50s and you say to yourself, actually, my definition of success is mine personally is spending long, slow time with people that I love and people that I respect and people that I can learn from. And so your definition of success changes. But I think in the early years, certainly in your 30s and 40s, you get obsessed with one definition of success. And a lot of the coaching I do is around, okay, let's talk about what your definition of success is. Is it trying to spend more time with family? Is it taking opportunities that allow you to do that? And there's trade-offs and compromises in that. But if you do that consciously, it is a good decision for you. But being clear about what are the criteria of my success is a huge piece of work for many people to overcome because they're told to be successful, you have to be this or you have to do that.
I think you've made such a good point about the fact that what you're doing is making things conscious.
Yeah.
Because what we know is that mostly we just make decisions that are unconscious.
Yeah.
That we are not rational.
Yeah.
And at least until somebody comes along and gets the rational stick and says, this is the banquet in front of you.
Exactly.
At the moment, you've just been gnawing on a small chicken wing.
Yeah.
But actually, you didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
We're just unconsciously driven. And then,
Absolutely.
Of course, we get to 50 and go, hang on, how did I get here? I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
They looked like there was a lot more fun to be had. How come I'm here? Because we're not conscious, we're unconscious.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think the third thing that I do when I coach people is encourage people to learn cognition and composure.
Yeah.
What holds a lot of women back in particular is the inability to have those competencies in the unconscious mind as well as the conscious.
So what do you mean by, I'm going to do a little reading in the moment from my first book, but what do you mean by composure?
Great. So when you play poker with me, you can immediately tell what my tell is. When you watch my eye contact, you can tell what I'm thinking, where I'm thinking. You can observe other people's body language. And I think composure is partly about your non-verbal communication, but particularly for the people that I coach, it is about your verbal communication. So being able to keep your breathing calm and collected, keep your body language open, and be able to articulate what it is you want to say in a very composed manner without losing your cool.
Yep. Which is hard, right?
Oh, it's
so hard.
It's hard, but you can practice it and you can learn it. It's not this kind of thing you're either born with or not.
I agree.
There are tools and techniques. And then I think that goes with cognition, because you need to be able to read the room. And women are often told, you have great intuition. Use it, bloody use it.
Yep.
If you have an ability of cognition to read the room and the tools and techniques of composure, actually that gives you this unbelievably irritating word, gravitas.
Yes, but I think it's right. Excuse me, that's just the timer going off about the chicken upstairs, but that's okay. We can keep talking for 10 more minutes. Yes, I have to feed Anne because she's come up from Melbourne.
Yes, I don't perform without food.
Yeah, I've got cardamom chicken, in case you're wondering, in the oven.
You and I have talked about this many times. You know, many women are held back by this lack of perception of lack of executive presence. And I think for me, composure and cognition gives you the ability to say your piece credibly in meetings.
Yeah, I think it's very, very, because we are naturally so reactive, and we sort of look at some people, and this comes back to the notion of Instagram and social media. We look at other people and go, they're so composed, but they've had to work on it. It's really hard.
It's constructed. Right? It's constructed.
Absolutely. You know, I'm an actor. It does not come naturally to us to walk out in front of 2,000 people and perform. It does not come naturally to be in a television studio, you know, when the light's fading.
And I think in the work context, it is your responsibility to have a voice. You are in the room because you've got the experience.
Yes.
You are in the room because you've got the credibility. You really should say something.
Yes, but we don't. So I'm just going to read a little bit from my book. I've cut a whole lot out. This is Kat, the character from Why Smart Women Make Bad Decisions. She's in a meeting. You are in a meeting. The office table is scattered with half-drunk takeaway coffee cups and empty cupcake shells. There's an inspirational poster on the wall. Make your life a masterpiece. Imagine no limitations on what you can be, have, or do. Inspirational sayings dog you wherever you go. You don't feel your life is a masterpiece, more like a crayon drawing made by an exhausted post-tantrum 4-year-old. You've been sitting in the meeting now for 26 minutes and 47 seconds. Your resting heart rate is currently tracking between 75 and 93, actually 94. That's not good. Also, is it really a resting heart rate if you're in a meeting with plagiarising Liam from finance? You check your Fitbit again. You've only done 3,768 steps. You are regretting not putting the Fitbit back on for an hour after your shower this morning, so you're mentally giving yourself another 1,000 steps. If it's not recorded, though, it doesn't count. Like life, really. You've gone to speak 6 times in the past 26 minutes, actually now 27 minutes and 38 seconds. The meeting is only slated for an hour. You have 33 minutes and 22 seconds left in which to speak. Your heart is slamming against your ribs. Your hands are sweaty and you feel sick. What is wrong with you? It's just a meeting. Just speak. Laura from Legal has just started speaking. She has lovely hair, but you find her cold. She has one of those quiet voices that commands attention. People have stopped looking at their phones and are looking intently at her. You are quietly spoken as well, but people don't look so much at you as through you. She's currently punctuating her well-thought-out points with her attractive hands. She is wearing a Fitbit too. You would give anything to see her step count. You wonder if she has those scales that don't just tell you your weight.
They tell you about fat and water percentages too. You slump further in your seat and check your Fitbit again. Sometimes your Fitbit mistakes arm movements for steps. Not today, though. Also, you still haven't spoken. Every time you attempt to, you break out in a sweat. Simon, your manager, gave you feedback at your last performance review.
You're a bit too reticent, Kat. You've got good ideas. Let's hear some of them.
What if you open your mouth and your opinion is under par? Stop being negative, Kat. Stop putting yourself down. Be positive. You take yourself in hand. Give yourself a mental slap across the cheek. Stop being so pathetic, Kat. Just open your mouth and say it. You sit up in your seat. Reframe the opening sentence. Decide to start with "these measures are," as opposed to the more insipid "I think there are some issues." You take 2 calming deep breaths, which don't work. You inhale for a 3rd time, slowly. You're building up to it. Your mouth is forming the word "these." Too late. Peter from marketing is speaking. He has no qualms about expressing himself. Words come spilling out of his mouth in torrents. He seems much admired. His ideas are completely bereft of originality. So much for innovating. Heart rate now 110. You need to exercise more. If you got off the train 1 station early, you'd get your steps up. You could start cycling. You'd have to attach the Fitbit to your shoes, though, so the wheel revolutions would count as steps. You look up. James and Matthew have apparently been speaking after Peter. They've done a dual graph on the whiteboard. While you'd been strategizing around your steps, you missed the presentation from the 3 disciples. 9 minutes, 23 seconds to go. It's too late to speak now. You'll look desperate. The upside of that, though, is that nobody can judge you. That's a good thing. Judgment is awful. You invariably fall short. Actually, in all truth, it's not just negative judgment you're afraid of. You want people being stopped in their tracks by your incisive comments and quiet, understated gravitas. Maybe you didn't speak, but at least you didn't out yourself as being mediocre.
Wow. I mean, I've been in those meetings endlessly.
Yeah.
You know, the key is you have to focus. You've got to, if you're in the room, you've been invited for a reason, no matter what that reason is.
Yep.
In my younger days, it was to take the notes. In my latter years, it was to listen and then offer a way forward. But you have to focus. You have to be fully present.
Do you have a lot of clients that won't speak, that do go through that process?
Loads.
And what do they say about it?
They say imposter syndrome. I mean, it kicks in at all ages. But they say, a good example, I fought tooth and nail to get on this board. And now I'm in the boardroom and I've lost my voice. I can't speak because I'm worried that what I say is not going to have credibility. I mean, the immediate response to that is, let's go back through your qualifications, shall we? You know, Harvard, INSEAD, 30 years of experience. There's a reason you are on that board. There's a reason you're in the leadership team. There's a reason you've been asked to the meeting. So trying to get conscious, rational views of why you're there, I think is important. I'm invited to this meeting because I have experience in X.
And they do say that that's actually for imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, as they also call it, is that to actually get up in the morning and go through your achievements, actually look at them. Actually instruct your brain.
And I did with one of my coaches because I was really struggling to get that kind of breakthrough. I printed out a CV. It was her CV. I anonymized it and then gave it to her and said, would you hire this person? I should absolutely look at this, look at that. And then she realized it was her.
Oh, smart. And that's so smart.
And I said, so why would you not say anything? Oh, well, I might flush, So there's lots of physical things that I think women are concerned about.
Of course.
If you're menopausal, of course, there's the red mist and the sweats and everything else that goes with it. But just remember, you're in that room for a reason. And as one of my clients said last week in a public meeting, you know, gender targets are not just about optics. They're about performance.
That's right.
So you're not just in the room to make the gender target optics look good. You're in the room because there's an expectation of insight, of credibility, of experience, of a high level of performance. And so I think it's really something that we all need to ponder very carefully about, well, why are we actually there in the first place? And if we're there, shouldn't we say something?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we have a point of view about something that we're highly qualified in?
Absolutely. And of course, it's such a good point that we have this terrible, terrible fear that everyone can see that we're flushed. Everyone can see that we're shaking. And in fact, everyone knows that our heart is racing or our knees trembling. Yeah, we've got both dogs in here now because they know it's nearly dinner time. So Anne is actually patting both simultaneously because if she pats Yo-Yo and Ryder doesn't get patted, then there's
all hell will break loose.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think on the illusion of transparency, honestly, nobody's looking at you. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. They're actually looking at you thinking, why are you not saying anything?
They're not.
Why are you not saying anything?
That's right. But the other thing about the illusion of transparency is that everybody's incredibly self-involved.
Yeah.
And I think the idea that you're the center of the universe and everyone's looking at you is not right.
Yeah.
People are very, very self-involved.
Very, very. And I think in those situations, short and concise communication is best. You know, I always talk about sentences of 7 words or less if you can.
Yeah.
But ideally 5.
Yeah.
And then all you've got to say is 5 words or 7 words. You know, we don't have to do this really long, deductive, structured communication in meetings. We actually need to ask really curious questions, or we just need to say short, concise sentences.
Why do you think people do extrapolate too much? I think
it's their brain kicking in. It's the word actually isn't a word. It's a sound of breath.
Yeah.
It's a habit.
Yes.
I've just done it. It's a habit.
Yes.
It's a habit.
Yes.
And people start to ramble and waffle because they're trying to get their brain to catch up, which is why I say, if you have a salient point, keep it really short. 3 words, 5 words, 7 words, not 55 adjectives. In one sentence and a big, long, deductive story. Be inductive in the way that you structure your communications. Say what you mean up front, and then if you have to, give evidence or data. And actually, from a gender perspective, in communication, I found in my personal experience, this is much more effective.
Oh, way more. Way more. I think that idea is of like sentences that are way too long and that have got what I call frippery on either sides of it. Is almost around visibility. It's like, if I just keep talking, I'll be a little bit below the parapet. No one will quite know what I'm saying, so I'm not accountable for what I'm saying. Whereas it's far riskier, but far more impactful to say something shorter.
Yes, and I think I do like the brain scrambler of a really inappropriate adjective every now and again.
Absolutely.
You know, we often talk about transformation and, we're in the midst of transformation and how difficult that's going to be. And so I do like to talk about if you're going to do transformation, it should hurt and it should be delicious. That kind of language to get a point across.
Yeah.
And certainly with certain business dynamics and power dynamics in particular that take place in organizations today, certainly in the corporate world, I think communication is critical. It will literally save your life if you can get what you mean out of your mouth and land it with confidence.
It's such an interesting thing you said about the word delicious because, we work in the same environment, you and I, and often in the same room with the same people that we're trying to sort of influence. And as you say, corporate speak is just so anaesthetizing.
Oh, it's terrible.
It's just terrible. And to actually use language that we use in the theatre or we watch on television or we just would use now, it actually wakes people's brains up. Yeah. We're no longer just it's no longer stupefying.
Yeah.
Because we're not listening to the same old, which is, and as we know, corporate speak was invented by the public service to obfuscate. So it's in order you can say something without saying anything.
And I think now the use of what we call kitchen English, and I was taught that in my career at Accenture, talk with kitchen English, and I love that expression.
I love it.
So you can explain very complicated things in very simple terms and people understand it. So you can solve the problem, you can take the opportunity, you can explain to somebody when there's a difficult situation in really simple terms.
And then it can be enacted.
And then people can act on it.
And we can actually do something. So, Anne Burns, what's for you next?
I'm in the midst of writing my book.
Tell me about the book.
The book is called Fleurning.
Too funny.
It is the anti-perfectionist's guide to learning from failures.
Oh, that's really good. And it is a beautiful thing indeed that you have got on that plane and come up from Melbourne
to spend
time on this podcast. Thank you very much, Anne Burns. That was a highly pragmatic and instructive 40 minutes we have spent together, and I'm very appreciative. Yo-Yo is also very appreciative.
So beautiful.
That you managed to pat her whilst talking. So that's some multitasking right there, right?
That is the art of leadership. The art of leadership is having good dogs.
Yeah, having good dogs, patting a groodle while giving an interview in a podcast. So thank you very much for listening, everybody, and I will see you next week. This is Annie McCubbin signing off, and thank you. Bye. Thanks for tuning into Why Smart Women with me, Annie McCubbin. I hope today's episode has ignited your curiosity and left you feeling inspired by my anti-motivational style. Join me next time as we continue to unravel the fascinating layers of our brains and develop ways to sort out the fact from the fiction and the over 6,000 thoughts we have in the course of every day. Remember, intelligence isn't enough. You can be as smart as paint, but it's not just about what you know, it's about how you think. And in all this talk of whether or not you can trust your gut, if you ever feel unsafe, whether it's in the street, at work, in a car park, in a bar, or in your own home, please respect that gut feeling. Staying safe needs to be our primary objective. We can build better lives, but we have to stay safe to do that. And don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast and share it with your fellow smart women and allies. Together, we're hopefully reshaping the narrative around women and making better decisions. So until next time, stay sharp, stay savvy, and keep your critical thinking hat shiny. This is Annie McCubbin signing off from Why Smart Women. See you later. This episode was produced by Harrison Hess. It was executive produced and written by me, Annie McCubbin.